Dennis Prager. Conservative. Jew. Old. Dennis Prager has a YouTube channel called PragerU. PragerU hosts videos where Dennis Prager and some of his guests talk about being conservative, living Judeo-Christian values, how much better things were in olden days. That's pretty much all you need to know about Dennis Prager to understand this response video. So I'm really at a loss for words here after watching this video. The question that Prager is attempting to answer here, although he never does seem to get around to actually proving his conclusions, concerns the afterlife. I'm going to let him ask it for me.
Is there an afterlife? Life after this life ends?
So this is a pretty fair question. It's a common philosophical question that everyone has asked themselves at one time or another. So what is Dennis Prager's answer to this question?
And here's the answer. If there is a God, there is an afterlife.
Are you kidding me? That's like me answering the question, are there pots of gold at the end of rainbows, with, well, if leprechauns exist, then there are pots of gold at the end of rainbows. Now, all of a sudden, there are two things that I have to prove, instead of just the one. And here's the real fucked up thing. Even if I somehow manage to prove that leprechauns exist, that doesn't in any way prove that there are pots of gold at the end of rainbows. I would instead have to convince you that the same leprechauns from Irish folklore exist in order to come anywhere close to justifying my conclusion. In the same way, even if Prager could prove that God exists, that does not prove that there is an afterlife. Prager would also have to prove that there exists a completely moral and ethical God. Even if you look at many of the most used proofs of God's existence, the first cause, evidence from design, evidence from free will and consciousness, none of these prove the existence of a moral entity. While in the video, Prager uses the terms God and good and just God interchangeably, he has created a scenario where he has to prove the existence of a good and just God in order to have a justifiable belief in his conclusion. So what is his evidence?
First, this life is filled with an immeasurable amount of injustice and suffering. The only way there can be some ultimate justice for victims of evil is if there is an afterlife, and the only way comfort is available to those who suffer unjustly, from painful disease and premature death to the death of a child, is if there is an afterlife.
Pay close attention to this argument and arguments like these. Religious figures, especially politically charged religious figures, will use this type of argument all the time. I've seen many of Dennis Prager's videos, and he is particularly guilty of this. When asked if God or some other religious concept exists, they dodge the question and shift the conversation to a different topic. They instead choose to answer the question, is God, or this religious concept, or in this case the afterlife, good? That's not the question he posed to us at the title of the video. The question is there an afterlife? Just because it would be nice and cozy for there to be an afterlife does not mean that one exists.
These are facts, and facts don't care about your feelings.
Facts also tend not to care about your religious beliefs. That was Ben Shapiro, fellow conservative and regular contributor to PragerU. Now, I have a lot of respect for Ben. He is well read and at least attempts to be intellectually honest. He is a great debater, as evidenced by his many YouTube videos, and definitely capable of crafting a well-thought-out argument. What you find, however, with a lot of these right-wing religious thinkers is that they tend to make one special allowance where logic goes out the window, and that is for religion.
Second, since God is not physical, the physical world is not the only reality.
So again, this is an excellent assertion, but I'm still waiting for the evidence from Prager. This assertion is only true if you accept that there is a good and just God. This video really started to make me wonder at this point who the intended audience was. I can't think of an atheist, agnostic, or even the biggest fence-sitter that would be swayed by any of these arguments. Now, you may think I'm being dishonest by cutting the video at this point, but it continues along these lines for another couple minutes, and what this amounts to is really nothing more than an assertion.
So, no God, no soul, no afterlife.
Again, I don't think that many non-believers would have trouble accepting that. No God, no soul, no afterlife. But is the inverse true? If there's a God, then is there a soul? And if there is a soul, is there an afterlife? No, this isn't true. In order for this to even make a little bit of sense, God, again, must be replaced with good and just God. But here's the thing. If God is completely moral, is he even capable of designing an infinitely wise plan that is immoral and unjust? A Christian will tell you that this is a result of free will, but ultimately, this is still all God's plan. Furthermore, if morality derives from God, who is to say that physical reality that we experience is even immoral? Who is to say that this existence isn't completely moral and we, with our tiny ant brains, are incapable of seeing God's justice in the world? Why is this not possible?
Now, of course, those who doubt God's existence have every reason to doubt an afterlife. But if you believe in a good God, then you have to believe there's an afterlife.
Okay, I have a question here. Where are all these God believers out there that don't believe in an afterlife? At this point, I'm seriously asking. Are there a group of Christians or Jews out there that believe in the God of the Bible, but either don't believe or are having trouble accepting that there is life after death, that this video is targeted at?
I once attended a funeral where the man officiating said, "While there is no afterlife, we do live on, through our good works and in the memories of loved ones." If people live on through their good works, then children who die don't live on. The number of good works most children are even capable of is minuscule. If there's no afterlife, we don't live on. Period. Let's be honest enough to acknowledge that.
I hardly feel the need to even address this at all. No one, and I mean not a single person, who has ever said we live on the memories of others and based upon our good works, ever meant that a person literally lives on after they die. And Prager makes this case multiple times in the video. I just showed you a small clip. Is he being intentionally dishonest here? Is he trying to appear smarter than he is? I don't know. So after watching most of this video, one of my main questions remains, who is this video for? Are there really that many Christians and Jews out there that don't believe in an afterlife that need some convincing from Dennis Prager? Is this video intended to convert atheists and agnostics with poor arguments that we've heard debunked many times before? I mean, from an atheist and agnostic's perspective, he doesn't even attempt to answer the question that he posed to us at the beginning of the video. So again, I ask, who is this video for? Now finally, at the end, Dennis Prager says something that's a little interesting.
If there's no afterlife, none of us will ever again be with those we most love and who love us. If there's no afterlife, neither anyone murdered nor any murderer will ever receive ultimate justice. If there's no afterlife, this life, for the vast majority of people who ever lived and for those alive now, is a meaningless crapshoot. But I do know this: my belief in God and the afterlife keeps me sane. The thought that this life is all there is means that torturers get away with the horrors they have engaged in. It means that this life is random and pointless. And it means that I will never again see anyone I love. This would drive me mad. In fact, I don't see how it wouldn't drive anyone mad who cares about suffering and who loves anyone.
Okay. I think I see what's going on here now. Let me try this on for size. If you don't believe in an afterlife, then you don't believe in a good and just God. If you don't believe in a good and just God, then you don't believe that there's justice for those people who suffer in this physical reality. If the thought of victims suffering does not drive you insane while not receiving justice in an afterlife, then you must not care about the victims of suffering or love anyone. So therefore, if you don't believe in an afterlife and are not insane, then you don't care about the victims of suffering or love anyone. So all of this was just one really long and drawn out way of telling me that I'm either a really big piece of shit or that I secretly believe in an afterlife and I am lying to myself. Having watched Dennis Prager for a very long time, I think that he would say that God has written the precepts of morality on my heart, and by choosing to ignore them, I am in fact lying to myself. So stay with me here. This may seem a little off topic, but let me tell you what this reminds me of. So what I'm about to read is a really, really famous thought experiment. Your route to work takes you past a shallow pond. One morning, you notice that a small child has fallen in and appears to be in difficulty in the water. The child is crying in distress, and it seems at risk of drowning. You are tall and strong, so you can easily wade in and pull the child out. However, although you'll come to no physical harm if you rescue the child, you will get your clothes wet and muddy, which means you'll have to go home and change, and likely you'll be late for work. So after the scenario is read, the question is then asked, in this situation, do you have a moral obligation to rescue the child? More often than not, people will say, yes, it's your moral obligation to rescue the child. So the scenario is then changed up multiple times. One of the changes include, what if the child were not right in front of you, but a far distance away? But you could be transported to that location at no significant cost to you in time to make the rescue. So the idea behind this is to get you to think. Is there a difference ethically between a child that is drowning right there in front of you versus a child that is far away and that you cannot see? So while there may not be a child in my hometown or on my way to work, there is a child suffering in, let's say, Africa. So if I say that it is my moral obligation to help a child within my sight, why is it not also my moral obligation to help a child that is out of sight, but that I am 100% sure is suffering? So while we may not be here to solve that ethical dilemma today, we can recognize that there is no ethical difference, or at least it's difficult to describe the ethical difference between the two situations. However, we can recognize that there is a pragmatic difference. The child in front of you causes you to react emotionally, and therefore most would be more willing to help the seen child rather than the unseen one. So let me actually change this scenario one more time to more accurately reflect the world that we live in. And this will be a more pragmatic thought experiment. Your route to work takes you past a huge lake. One morning, you notice that a small child has fallen in and appears to be in difficulty in the water. The child is crying in distress, and it seems at risk of drowning. You are tall and strong, so you can easily swim and pull the child out. However, although you'll come to no physical harm if you rescue the child, you will get your clothes wet and muddy, which means you'll have to go home to change, and likely you'll be late for work. You get in the water and save the child. When you get back to shore, you hear another child calling out in distress. You decide to swim out yet again and save the child. You put the child on your back and you swim to shore. The child is safe. As you go to leave, yet again you hear a cry. This time it is not one cry, but 3 children calling out in distress. You will only have time to save one of them. Before you can jump back into the water, a wizard comes up to you and tells you that there are 10 children dying in some lake that you have never heard of in Japan. He can teleport you there and back, but you would still have time to save one of those children. At this point, though, you would be very fatigued and you would run the risk of drowning yourself. The wizard could wave his magic wand and save all of the children at no cost to him, but he is kind of a dick and doesn't want to. Now I've got a good idea what Dennis Prager would do. Dennis Prager would walk away. He would walk away and he would say, "Don't worry, everyone. All of these children that are drowning, they are not really drowning. Poseidon is coming to take them away. He will give them gills so that they can breathe underwater and fins so they can swim. They are coming to live with Poseidon in the lost city of Atlantis." I, on the other hand, have accepted that there are more drowning children than I can help, and I have my own life to live as well. I try and help others that cross my path, and will go out of my way for those I care about. Though I encourage others to do the same, I have accepted that Poseidon is not coming to save those children, and that they are going to die. To suggest that I don't care about others' suffering is false. To say that I don't love others is also false. However, I will not lie in order to convince myself of a just reality for which I have no evidence. I would have to be mad in order to do so.